Cheating, exploiting, dirty, dirty words. We don't like any of those words, do we? But sometimes guilds take it upon themselves to be a little bit on the clever side. Clever use of game mechanics is often the term used to describe some sort of exploit or cheat or justify a reason using it. But more often than not, it's blatant cheating. This week we're going to look at 5 ways in which World of Warcraft has been exploited and the punishments they received. Let's take a look. Number 5. Looking for raid, the camel penis of WoW. It's hard to imagine that any top guild would care about LFR, but that won't stop Blizz. This was the first time and probably the last time Blizzard put super important set bonuses that could affect an entire raid and heroic raid progression on gear attainable by Scuba Steve on dry land. But when LFR launched, that's exactly what they did. Although the gear was technically a downgrade from the previous Firelands raid, the set bonuses, especially for tanks, made it a required asset for the top guilds. In dark rooms across the globe, plans were hatched. How can we obtain as much of this gear as possible? The solution was actually pretty simple. Just take 3 guys from separate loot tables and a shitload of alts and smash through it. Even though this would take approximately 9 repeat runs to complete, it gave the best chance of getting as much gear as possible. Until Batman! No, an exploit was found. Via some relogging trickery, it meant that the dropped items could just be assigned to the person needing it without bringing in mass alts and wasting a ton of time. Now, by bypassing a loot system is a major exploit, no doubt about it. The fact there was a legitimate way of getting the same results is all the more reason this exploit is a butt nugget in an otherwise organised world. This time though, Blizzard decided to come down hard on the guilds who took advantage of it, and many top guilds and mid-level guilds did get a world first, just not the one they expected. An 8-day ban, designed purely to lock them out of being able to run heroic modes the following week, and certainly putting a huge cockblock on any of those guilds getting a world first. Number 4. Arthur Menopause, the culmination and final boss of Wrath of the Lich King, besides Halion. The fight had a lot to live up to, but unlike the new Indiana Jones, this was decent enough to be regarded as one of the most epic fights ever. This encounter meant everything to the raid scene, and everything before it had just been preparation. Entering the Ice Crown Citadel, battling monsters, ghouls, and floating bony giants with no legs, the race was on. But first, the normal mode must be completed. Even normal mode was exciting. Killing Arthurs, for Christ's sake. This one would be plagued by controversy though, and in my opinion, one of the most questionable bannings on this list. On February 3rd, the super powerhouse guild Insidia brought down Lich King 25 normal world first. On February 4th, the raiders received a 72-hour ban. Yeah, that's a bad hangover right there. It's easy to hate on the big guilds, either because of being jelly or because of the few of their overly dedicated fanbase. The fire grew like Britney in a KFC. Blizzard dropped a hotfix in the encounter just before the ban wave, saying, changed Saronite bombs and thermal charges from engineers to no longer do siege damage. What could this mean? Did the bombs blow Arthas into the moon, where space goats took him to their home planet for cheese and wine, and this could go on. What the hell was this about? It's then revealed that Saronite bombs from engineers were rebuilding the platform? What?
So what you're telling me is the bombs rebuilt the platform? Okay.
The offender was a rogue named Nahiko. Luckily, I had a brief chance to play alongside him before this event, and know he used these bombs in his normal rotation, as did any other engineer. Insidia also relayed this information that they simply had no idea what was causing the platform to sometimes rebuild in their tries. And a lot of encounters at the first time are very buggy. These are the things most people don't see, as by the time they reach a boss, it's been killed and tweaked dozens of times. But in general, most new bosses are buggier than Starship Troopers. Nevertheless, Blizzard dropped the Bradhammer all over their ass, with a view to block heroic raid progression the following week. Insidia went on to defeat Arthas for the second time that week on their alt characters, not only to prove that they could do it without exploiting, but also that they didn't need to cheat the easiest phase of this fight. Number 3. Some exploits are considered justified. Probably most exploiters feel justified at the time of committing the crime, but the next exploit was so widespread in use that Blizzard didn't drop the Bradhammer on anyone who committed the offense, which was a lot of players. Tier 13, involving Blackwing Descent and the Twilight Citadel, was one of the buggiest and unfinished instances ever released to the general player base. It had 10-man content unchanged from 25-man, but also several bosses that were considered unkillable or required clever use of game mechanics to defeat. None more so than the infamous Ray Charles dragon Atremedes, the love child of Nefarian and Maloriac. To BH, I kind of would have expected more problems than blindness from that marriage. This dragon had more problems than parentage, however, is that it seems like this was a good boss on paper, with the dragon trying to use its sound rings to locate players and players being debuffed with sound if they made mistakes. If your soundbar filled, the dragon could find you and roast you like a southern style barbecue. Unavoidable sound rings, instant full sound, instant deaths, unclickable gongs. Sometimes he didn't even land. As such, guilds discovered that they could mute the dragon. By standing in certain places, the sound rings couldn't hit the raid and he could easily be DPS down. When this first happened, the top guilds were pissed at missing a world first on a boss they thought unkillable, but Blizzard did nothing. At all. They were like, shit, fuck it. So more and more guilds started exploiting the boss repeatedly, for weeks. Amazingly, for an important kill, no footage was released of these kills. Weird. Eventually, a couple of brave guilds released footage of what was happening. And still, Blizzard did nothing. Showing defeat in the overall boss design, they accepted this defeat and allowed the exploiting to continue. The boss was finally fixed and was stupidly easy. Number 2. Blackwing Lair was a major step forward in WoW raiding. The instance was immense in design and compared to its predecessor Molten Core, and it added something that would plague weaker raiders for the end of time. Individual responsibility.
And who the fuck was the idiot who feared you? Fucking retard idiot! You fucked up my kiting, you cunt fuck!
It cannot be understated how much of a leap this was. Molten Core bosses could be done by 15 out of 40 people. You expected losses in these fights, but it didn't really matter. The Blackwing Lair was not to be trifled with, and Blizzard made sure of that with a gear and skill check as the very first boss. A stance that would significantly alter later in the game's life, where access to new instances was greeted by so-called gift bosses for stepping foot into these dungeons. Razergore not only required separate groups of DPS, but also kiting, orb control, threat control, and a hell of an intense first phase. No problem, phase 1 can be exploited. Let's Mario Party! Back in vanilla, paladins were alliance only, but had a spell which served no other purpose than to allow easier wipe recovery. This spell was called Divine Intervention, and would instantly kill the casting paladin, but place another team member in an impenetrable shield until they removed it. Although the player inside the shield couldn't do anything, he couldn't be killed, and encounters could reset around him. A pretty nifty idea, to be fair, which also led to many misclicking paladins suddenly dropping on the floor. As you made Razergore a friendly unit while he was mind-controlled, you could actually cast Divine Intervention on him. Then let all of Phase 1 reset and skip directly to Phase 2, missing the whole difficult part of the encounter. Pretty smart work. I wonder why DI isn't in the game anymore. This is one of those moments where no fucks can be given in defending the exploiters. Skipping 50% of a fight is pretty clearly cheating, but again this went unpunished. No guilds were banned at all. How times have changed. Number 1. AQ40 is an astronomically sized raid dungeon. It gets the middle brother syndrome of coming after Blackwing Lair and before Naxxramas, which would overshadow this beautiful dungeon. This instance is so big you get to use your mounts, an unheard of prospect in any previous raid. The bosses were challenging and had many combinations of semi-boss trash, which was all interesting and dangerous. It was not without flaw though. AQ was big. Too big. The loot system was frustrating, requiring both rep and significant amounts of materials, which still plague the dungeons to this day. Most of all, the last boss was actually located below the first boss. Cthun is an epic boss, which dropped juicy, sexy items, but he had a 15-minute mount ride from the entrance to him. The trash before Cthun was so hard it could take 30 minutes alone to clear, let alone all the trash and bosses before it. When Naxxramas was available, the only loot of interest to anyone in AQ40 was Cthun himself, and thus the most absurd and obvious exploit ever was discovered. A US guild, Overrated, discovered that they could alter the game files and make the platform under the first boss disappear, allowing them to fall into the final boss room within a few seconds, and prevent not only riding to Cthun, but actually skipping every boss and trash in between. Now that's exploiting, and there's exploiting, but come on, no one could ever justify altering the actual game files as clever use of game mechanics. This time, Blizzard wasn't in the mood for ignoring blatant cheating, like with Razergore. This time, they unleashed their might and permanently banned everyone with a cheaty raid ID. The guild responded by sending out their most trusted community rep, who gave these thought-provoking and profound words. "Let me explain. We are the only US Horde guild that clears Nax. Been like that for a few weeks. People found that pre-Cthun Trash was so painful that they decided to install some stupid thing that deletes walls or something. And you could just run there after Scarab. I know, we had it coming. Blah, blah, whatever. We know we deserve it. I'm sure they'll try and get it rescinded because it's kind of a steep punishment, with no recourse, or whatever. That's one way of looking sincere. Or whatever." Okay, that was my top 5. I'm going to do a new big video every Monday. If you want to see last week's, go ahead and click the target behind me. Bye.